something I want people to know about this book is that it's not just a hip hop book. It's about so much more. But I can tell it's one of those books that I'm just going to go back to frequently. There's so much to absorb in it. There's so many um, connections that you make that I think are not obvious to the average hip hop fan. And you challenge these narratives of, this one party at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue was the start of hip hop. And there's so much regurgitation of those kinds of stories. And while they obviously have some influence, there's so many other things into play. And it's such a wide range of material that you corral in a way that's, able to be taken in by somebody who has no context for any of it. So
one of the things that really attracted me to sort of work with Rob was, he was on a particular podcast, interview with DJ B Man,
Right.
and so B Man, allowed Rob the space to really sort of talk about this sort of political history that really has not oftentimes been talked about in connection to, hip hop. So, Rob went on this, particularly sort of important sort of explanation of Daniel P. Moynihan, who has his own sort of horrible history with sort of making these arguments about the single family home and so forth. He wrote this important sort of report for the government that then became the ways in which social services really had this sort of demeaning viewpoint of Black people and other people of color. Talked about the cycle of poverty. But later on, as he's now advising Richard Nixon, well, just before he advised Richard Nixon, he comes up with this idea of benign neglect. And it's not a policy, but it informed policies in a way in which we had civil rights in 1968 with all of these laws that began to sort of emerge, 63, 64, 65. And all of a sudden, Moynihan is talking in 67, 68 about basically forget all of those laws and what they were doing to advance or remedy the problems of race. So with benign neglect, he was saying that race should be less important. And so then all of a sudden, all these social services were being cut or eliminated. And so Rob was talking about that. And it was that point that, it was finally clear, like, okay, now I know how I could sort of also chime in to what Rob is talking about.
I went into what caused us to pick up a microphone, what caused us to turn a turntable into an instrument, what caused us to pick up an aerosol can and paint the city, what caused us to use our bodies as instrument and break. And memos courtesy of Patrick Moynihan, like benign neglect, policies like redlining, gentrification. We could even go back to Robert Moses's urban renewal plans and how the construction of the Southern State Parkway and the Cross Bronx Expressway catalyzed this environment for hip hop to grow. For me, the Bronx in the 1970s was like this petri dish, and these different circumstances were meshed together in this dish. And as a response to these circumstances, hip hop grew. I got to talk about that on that podcast. And I guess I was just inspired because of what I was writing about, these debates I was having with people online that didn't see me as a part of hip hop. And Rasul saw a post of mine promoting the podcast interview. And he was like, "We have something here, Rob." And when he responded that way, I was like, this is who's going to help me finish this book. And that's how we came together.